evening, depending on where you are joining us for this webinar. I hope you have had a great day and hope you all keeping well. Whilst the world still recovers from the global pandemic, business must go on. And I'm sure you are all here today joining us on this webinar with this strong positive belief, which was once said by Willie Nielsen: once you replace negative thoughts with positive ones, you'll start having positive results. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Shihan Sharif, the past Director Secretary to the Board of the Sri Lankan Business Council. I'm privileged and honored to be the moderator for this webinar today. And it's a very important topic that we're going to discuss, which is on everything you need to know while setting up a Dubai mainland and free zone business. Before we begin the webinar, as usual, a few important items that we need to get through so that we are all clear and ready to go through this very interesting and insightful presentation in a bit. Firstly, as you may notice, this session is being recorded and it's more for future reference. If for any reason you happen to drop off the Zoom call, please feel free to join back in. And if in case the limit has exceeded, you could please join us on the YouTube page, which goes as Sri Lankan Business Council, as we'll be streaming this webinar live there if in the event that we exceed the number. For any questions that you may have, and I'm sure most of you have got many questions, we've already started to receive them, please send them through via the Q&A tab and not the chat tab, via the Q&A tab that appears towards the bottom right of your screen. We will try to take or accommodate as many questions as possible during this session at the end of all the presentations. The chairman of the Sri Lankan Business Council, Mr. Muhammad Riza, together with the organizing committee, have put in tremendous effort to coordinate and facilitate this webinar. And in order to officially commence this webinar, may I now kindly request Mr. Riza to warmly welcome you all. Riza, it's over to you.
Your Excellency, the Ambassador Malraj de Silva, Consul General Nalinda Vijayaratna, panelists, members and the Board of Directors of Sri Lanka Business Council, past chairmen, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this webinar hosted by Sri Lanka Business Council in association with the Dubai Chamber, National Chamber of Exporters and Women in Management. In Dubai, in recent times, we are observing a renewed interest amongst the Sri Lankan companies to set up their businesses in UAE. While at Sri Lankan Business Council, we welcome it, we also believe it has to be done with careful planning and preparation. Sorry, it's this belief that kind of helped us to, or wanted us to, organize this webinar. Before we get on to that, I would also like to acknowledge the presence of our ambassador and also the Consul General. And also we thank them for their support and encouragement. I would also like to acknowledge the support from the Chamber of Commerce, Baker Tilly, National Chamber of Exporters, Women in Management for their support in putting this webinar together. Once again, on behalf of the Sri Lankan Business Council, I formally welcome each and every one of you to this webinar and wish you all success in your future plans in our traditional style by saying Assalamu alaikum, Aibowan, and Wanakkam. With this, let me also ask Menaka from National Chamber of Exporters to say a few words and introduce the chamber before we get on to the event. Thank you and welcome again. Menaka?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Riza Mohammed, for giving me this opportunity to address the audience on behalf of the National Chamber of Exporters of Sri Lanka. Good afternoon to all of you. Of course, SLBC Dubai has been very closely working with the NCE, especially during the time when we organized the Sri Lankan brands exhibition alongside the Dubai Expo 2020 a few months ago. SLBC Dubai has extended us a tremendous support in coordinating and organizing matters from that end. I know for a fact that the main objective of organizing this webinar today is also in support of especially Sri Lankan exporters who wish to expand their market access and reach UAE international market and establish their business contacts. I'm sure the organizers will share their contact details with the audience at the end of this session so that those who are interested in exploring the opportunity of reaching out to UAE market should be able to contact SLBC Dubai directly. We also as a chamber do our best to support all our member exporters in reaching out international market, and especially after the pandemic. I'm sure there are new market trends, new needs due to new normal. So once again, I take this opportunity to thank you, all of you, and also I wish you all the best in all your future endeavors. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Menaka, on behalf of the National Chamber of Exporters of Sri Lanka for joining this webinar and also addressing all the attendees. It was great to have you. Before we move on to the presentations itself, I'm sure which most of you are keen to take a look at, may I kindly invite you to fill up a short questionnaire. I've sent it through the chat. It's just a few questions just to get an understanding of the participants. And that will help us in terms of feedback as well as in organizing future webinars to understand the profile of all of you. So moving on to the first presentation. Our first presenter today is Mr. Daniel Sellers from the Dubai Chamber of Commerce. A quick introduction on Daniel. He is the chief representative in China at the Dubai Chamber of Commerce and Industry. His role focuses on developing the Chamber's network of stakeholder relations in China, which all of us understand is a massive market, and assisting member companies with market expansion. He possesses over 10 years of experience in China, working for foreign government and semi-government bodies in trade facilitation and policy advocacy roles. Previously, he held the roles at the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China and Enterprise Ireland, Beijing, where he helped European companies to expand exports to China and lobby for improved market access. He is also appointed as an honorary trade arbitrator by Shanghai Chamber of International Commerce under the Shanghai government. Daniel is a fluent Mandarin speaker, holds a Bachelor's of Commerce and a Chinese degree. He's also a postgraduate diploma holder in international business from the University College, Dublin. Quite a profile. So without further ado, may I kindly call upon Mr. Daniel Sellers to go ahead with the presentation of why Dubai.
Thank you very much, Jehan, for the introduction. Thank you, Riza, for the invitation today. Your Excellency's Ambassador, Your Excellency Consul General, distinguished guests. I'm very honored to be here today on behalf of Dubai Chambers to share some information with you all about the business environment here in Dubai and the opportunities for Sri Lankan companies. So Shahan, would you be able to share my presentation, please?
Sure thing.
So we'll go on to the first slide here. Next slide, please. So to start off the presentation, I just want to give some brief overview information about the country UAE and about Dubai and how it sits in terms of various rankings for business around the globe. The UAE is the Middle East's most globalized country, and it's the fourth most globalized country in the world. If you've ever visited Dubai, you'll notice that over 90% of the population here in Dubai are international citizens or expats, and only 10% are locals. We're first in the Arab world for ease of doing business and ranked 16 globally. We're first in terms of COVID resilience, so we had an excellent bounce back at the end of the COVID-19. In terms of Dubai as a city, it's ranked 5th in the top 10 cities in the world as a place to live. It's top city in the world in the region in terms of FDI attraction, and it's a favorite city for expats all over the globe to come here and live and enjoy the environment as well. It was in the past the #1 tourist destination in the world in terms of visitor numbers, and at the moment is ranked 4th best destination for international travelers. In terms of global influence, global soft power, it's regularly ranked in the top rankings within the region and highly within the globe. Next slide, please. So one of the common misconceptions we get in Dubai, often from new visitors and investors, is whether Dubai's economy is completely or largely focused on oil and gas industry. So this is a common misconception. Actually, the oil and gas industry in Dubai is only about 2% or less of the economy here. Abu Dhabi, the capital of United Arab Emirates, has a larger oil and gas industry. The biggest industry in Dubai by far is trade, which includes international trade and wholesale trade. And this fluctuates between about 25 to 30% of the economy. Logistics and transportation, which underpins trade, is about 12 to 15%. So if you think about it, approximately 40 to 45% of Dubai's economy is based around trade or logistics transportation. So almost half of it is about the flow of goods in and out of the emirate, which basically explains how Dubai plays such an important role in international trade and international business. Tourism is also highly ranked in the economy at 13%. It's also the main financial hub in the region. It's home to the Dubai International Financial Center, which is a leading free zone and regulator here in Dubai. So within this DIFC free zone, they use English common law as a basis. So it's very conducive to international banks, financial services firms to set up here and use the English common law system within the DIFC zone. In terms of manufacturing, it's about 10%. Most of the manufacturing in Dubai and UAE is related to downstream oil and gas products. So things like specialized plastics, specialized chemicals, also metals, mainly aluminium and steel. So this makes up a big part of the manufacturing industry here in Dubai. But the government in the UAE is making a concerted effort to attract more manufacturing here across different industries. And there's a new in-country value program being promoted by the Ministry of Industry and Advanced Technologies here in the UAE. So if you were to set up many manufacturing here in the UAE and the product you're manufacturing is on the ICV in-country value list, you will be able to have supplier contracts discussions and opportunities with some of the big state-owned companies here in the UAE. So that's another incentive that manufacturing is offering at the moment. Real estate is about 7% and construction is about 7% as well. So that's basically the backbone of Dubai's economy. Next slide. So just to go back to trade, as I mentioned, it's 30% of the economy here in Dubai. And what underpins the trade here in Dubai is a few things. First is the excellent infrastructure. So I'm talking about tangible and intangible infrastructure. In terms of tangible, Dubai's airport is the largest international airport in the world by passenger flow. Dubai's Jebel Ali port is the largest terminal port in the world outside of Asia by TEU volume. Also, Dubai is home to 30 free zones. So in Dubai, you have a choice where you want to register your business. You can register it in the mainland or you can register it in the free zone. And the 30 free zones in Dubai are separated by industry and they offer different ecosystem offerings. But these free zones in Dubai also make it very easy for foreign investors to come and set up trading companies here in Dubai. So for example, a free zone company is 0% corporate and personal income tax. It's also 100% foreign owned, so any foreign investor can own 100% of the company without a local partner. And it also allows 100% capital repatriation. So all 30 free zones offer those three core benefits. And in terms of trade, another thing that can be added to the infrastructure benefits of Dubai is its strategic geographical location. So it's located strategically between east and west. Just 4 hours flight from Dubai, you can reach about a third of the world's population. 8 hours flight, you can reach 2/3. DP World, one of the world's leading port and terminal operators, is based out of Dubai, and they have links all over the globe. And again, Dubai's customs, Dubai's business environment, its policies, it's all conducive to making it an excellent trading hub. Our number one trading partner is China at approximately $400 billion US. And then India, USA, Saudi Arabia, and Switzerland. Next slide, please. So Dubai's leadership and the UAE's leadership never wants to rest on our laurels. We're always looking to improve, always looking to expand Dubai's role as a trading hub. So we're still looking to expand international trade from Dubai by a further 2 trillion dirhams in the coming years, which is $544 billion US. How are we going to do that? Well, first we're going to focus on the high growth markets across Latin America, Africa, and Asia. And I would say Sri Lanka is included there as a high potential growth market. Dubai Chamber, working closely with the Dubai government. We are working on a plan to expand rapidly at the international offices representing Dubai around the world. Up to 50 offices will be established in the coming years. We also plan to connect to more cities via flight routes and via shipping routes through Emirates Airlines and DP World. Next slide, please. And again, what underpins the trade in Dubai, which is 30% of the economy, the international airport here, it's the #1 international airport in the world. We've had a small cutback in passengers throughout the COVID years, but these numbers are increasing back to the old levels very quickly. And we're expecting our numbers to be back on level with pre-pandemic numbers in the next 1 to 2 years. So last year we saw 29 million, and in Q1 this year we've seen almost 6 million. Next slide, please. And again, in hospitality, I'm sure many of you have been to Dubai, and you'll be amazed by all the tourist attractions that are here on offer. Dubai is home to 750 hotels. It was one of the most visited tourist destinations in the world pre-COVID, and now we're already recovering quickly, and we're back to that ranking in the top 3 cities in the world of tourist visitors. Again, these numbers are recovering very quickly, and we expect to go up these rankings further in the years to come. This is great for if you're doing international business as well. It's not just a place for leisure tourism, but it's also a place for business tourism. Many exhibitions, events, platforms, they're all held here in Dubai. They're held here at the Dubai World Trade Center. So if you're doing import-export or a service company, it's a great place to put your company located in one of the free zones. And then by participating in all the business platforms and events here in Dubai, it's a great way to meet customers from all over the world, especially from Africa, from India, and also from Latin America. Dubai is an excellent hub for meeting companies and business partners from these regions. Next slide, please. And also Dubai is, because of the very conducive policies we have here, like I mentioned, it's a 0% corporate tax and 0% personal income tax location. There's only 5% VAT, and there's 5% VAT and 5% customs tax. From next year, corporate tax will be introduced in Dubai. It will be 9% from June 2023. However, the corporate tax will only be taxed on companies operating in the mainland of Dubai on their net revenue from mainland operations. So in Dubai, there's 2 options. You can choose a free zone company and a non-free zone company. Non-free zone companies are usually more focused on servicing customers in the mainland. Free zone companies are usually more focused with providing services or with focusing on using Dubai as a hub to reach international markets. So free zone companies and free zone revenues through international markets are not eligible for corporate tax. And again, last year we were the first rank globally for FDI project attraction. Next slide, please. So here are some of the new initiatives. I believe most of you are familiar with the core benefits we have in Dubai, like I mentioned, in terms of taxation, free zones, business policies, and so on. But now the government is continually offering new ways to attract investors here. There's new visa categories making it easier for you to come here, work here, and live here long term. So if you register a company here in Dubai, free zone or mainland, you will get a residency visa, and you will also be allowed to work here in the United Arab Emirates. So your residency visa will be as long as your company business license is. So if you register a business license for 1 year, you'll get a 1 year residence visa, and 2 years, and so on. But now for for investors who satisfy certain criteria, if you invest a certain amount, you will be eligible for the Golden Visa, which is a 10-year program. We also have an investor visa, which if you invest in property over 1 million dirhams, you can again achieve a 2-year or 5-year visa, depending on the amount you invest in property. And then there's also an investor visa for investing in companies and investment funds here in Dubai as well. The bankruptcy law was recently updated to make it more transparent and effective for international business operators. And now, since recently, if you ever wanted to open a company in the free zone or outside the free zone in Dubai, you're required to have a local partner. And that local partner would take 51% minimum of the shares within this non-free zone company. In the last 2 to 3 years, this has been liberalized, and now you can own 100% of a free zone company or 100% of a non-free zone company. Non-free zone companies, certain sectors can be owned 100%, but the vast majority of activities now allow 100% ownership. So now this restriction has been lifted, and it's now easier to own 100%. So now the decision whether to go free zone or non-free zone largely focuses on the nature of your business and the end market of your customer, whether they're on the mainland or whether they're in an international location outside of Dubai. There's also virtual working visas and remote working visas as well. And it's now possible also to obtain Emirati citizenship, when in the past it wasn't. Next slide, please. So this is just an overview of some of the new visas that you could consider applying for. There's also the special talent visa for special talents in science, medicine, sport, culture, art, a residency visa for investors. So again, if you set up a company, you'll get a visa. If you invest in property, you'll get a visa. If you invest in a fund and you meet certain criteria, you'll get a visa. It's not possible to retire here if you meet the right criteria. And there's also 1 year remote working or virtual working visas as well. And also for your children, if they're studying here in Dubai and they graduate, it's now possible for them to stay here after their graduation for a period to continue contributing to the growth story of the Emirate. And another initiative that's changed just this year, actually, now we've aligned with the International Working Week. So before we had the Friday and Saturday weekend, and now we're a Saturday and Sunday working week, which is quite unique within this part of the world. And it shows the commitment of the leadership here to align Dubai with international markets and to increase the prosperity and economic growth of Dubai. So that's already been initiated, and all the public sector here in Dubai are on the Saturday, Sunday work week. And the private sector has also come over to this work week as well. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview of our chamber and how we can support you. We are a chamber of commerce established in 1965. We were established by the ruler of Dubai. Last year, we have split the chamber up according to the mandate of His Highness into 3 new chambers. We have Dubai Chamber of Commerce focusing on the local economy. We have Dubai International Chamber focusing on international economy, and Dubai Chamber of Digital Economy focusing on the digital economy. We have 300,000 member companies, making us one of the largest chambers of commerce in the world and the largest in the Middle East region. We provide a variety of services related to trade facilitation, such as certificate of origin or ATA carnet issuance. We also provide legal, mediation and arbitration services. We are responsible for receiving delegations. both government and company level into Dubai and meeting with them here and introducing the business environment. And we also regularly send out delegations into international markets. I'm working with the International Relations Department, and we're under now the International Chamber, and we're now heavily focused on company attraction and making it easier for international companies to land here and to flourish here in Dubai. So we can actually help you to reach with potential partners, customers, and government agencies here in Dubai as needed if you're considering an investment here in the Emirates. Next slide. And this is just some of the pillars of our new strategy. We're focusing on the business environment, improving it constantly. So we listen to our members and we provide their feedback to the government here. FDI is a big part of our strategy now. And we want to bring more companies here to Dubai. And this webinar is an excellent initiative in that regard. We also will help 100 Dubai companies internationalize into new markets. So we, through our international offices and through our international partners, we're always looking for investment or business opportunities for Dubai-based companies. So we're also open to any suggestions from the Sri Lankan business community of opportunities there in Sri Lanka for Dubai companies. And Dubai is always looking to the future of incorporating the digital economy, of incorporating technologies like AI and blockchain into the economy. So we now have a focused chamber with His Excellency, the Minister of Artificial Intelligence, leading this chamber. And this is the Dubai Digital Chamber. Next chapter. So now we're actually up to 300,000 members, making us the largest chamber by far in the Middle East region and the largest chamber, one of the largest chambers of commerce in the world. These are all company members and not individuals. Next slide. And at the moment we have 12 offices. They're located all over the world. We have 4 in South America now. We have 4 in Africa. We have India. We have Azerbaijan covering the Central Asian region, and we have 2 offices in Shanghai, Shenzhen. All the offices do the same thing. They act as bridges between Dubai business community and foreign markets, both for attraction and expansion. I used to be the chief representative in China, so I was based there for 6 years with Dubai Chamber. I'm now back in Dubai HQ covering all markets. So a pleasure to be here connected with you today and answering your questions. Through the new initiative of Dubai government, which was recently announced, called Dubai Global, we have committed to supporting the Dubai government to open between 30 and 50 offices in the next 3 years. So we're at 12 now, so expect to see us in many more markets around the world and expect us to be more actively engaged with business communities in new markets. And here's my email, please. If you have any, please take it down just in case we don't have time to answer any questions today. Or if you have more detailed questions, you please feel free to email me and we will assign someone to your case and get back to you. Looking forward to the Q&A later and hope everyone's having a lovely day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for that very insightful presentation. I think after watching and listening to your presentation, we should rephrase the question of, instead of why do business in Dubai, to why not do business in Dubai. With all these achievements, one after the other, the resilience, flexibility, and the agility that the Dubai Chamber of Commerce has shown over the years, even during the global COVID pandemic, I think it's been simply amazing, to say the least. They've been very supportive of all our events that we've had. And thank you very much, Daniel, once again for that very insightful presentation. Moving on, whilst we start to get a lot of questions, I think we've exceeded about 30 to 40 questions already. Let's move on to the second presentation. And the second presentation, ladies and gentlemen, is on doing business in the UAE. And this will be presented by Ms. Akriti Mago from the prestigious and world-renowned company, Baker Tilly. Let me kindly introduce Akriti, who also possesses a heavy profile similar to all our presenters today. She started her career with KPMG Assurance Services for the banking industry, and she also handled the internal audit assignments during this period. During this stint, she was involved in the planning, execution, and completion of assurance and internal audit engagements of various clients from various different industries, including banks. and in accordance with international standards on auditing. These also included planning, budgeting, supervising junior staff, and coordinating with engagement managers and partners, along with the preparation and review of statutory financial statements. After completing her ICAEW, that's Institute of Chartered Accountants for England and Wales, she worked in Baker Tilly, UK, in their London office in corporate finance. Her area of expertise, ladies and gentlemen, was in business plans, valuations, due diligence, mergers and acquisitions. She is currently working as an associate director and handles assignments relating to internal audit, external audit, risk management, internal controls, and business performance improvement. Akriti, it's now over to you for the presentation on doing business in the UAE. Let me share my screen and open up the presentation.
Thank you very much, Shihan. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope that you're all doing well. And thank you, Shihan, for that wonderful introduction. Very kind of you. It is an absolute honor and pleasure to be invited by Sri Lanka Business Council to be a part of this webinar. And I really hope that I'm able to share some brief but very important and comprehensive information about doing business in the UAE and let you know how wonderful this wonderful jurisdiction of UAE really is. My presentation today will go through various aspects of setting up a business, as well as what happens once your entity is incorporated in the jurisdiction of UAE. Shihan, if you can populate the slides, please. Thank you very much. Shihan, if you can go to the next slide, please. Great. Welcome, everyone, to the webinar today. By way of introduction, I'm Akriti. I head the Corporate Services Department here at Baker Tilly, Middle East. I am based out of the Dubai office in Jumeirah Lakes Towers. My aim today, as a part of this webinar, is not just to educate you about how to do business and UAE as a jurisdiction, but also make you aware of the various aspects that you need to consider before you decide to move to the UAE. I was going to give a little bit brief about the UAE jurisdiction as such, but I think Daniel has done a really great job and he's shared some wonderful points about why UAE is now world known, not just as a tourist destination, but also as a business hub. And I'll jump right into it. There are three main avenues in which you can set up your company in the UAE. And some of these were briefly mentioned by Daniel in his presentation. I'll go through them one by one, and I hope that this will be informative. One of the main areas in which you can set up an entity is the mainland area. And mainland simply refers to any area that is not under a designated zone, i.e. a free zone. I saw some of the questions on the chat box that were regarding the changes in ownership criteria in the mainland. Now, the reason why some businesses would be required to go through a mainland entity rather than a free zone structure. And the reasoning is simply that there are certain activities that require approval from the economic department in Dubai or in Abu Dhabi. And these activities, because they are specific and they're specialized, let's say, for example, real estate, they can only be conducted through a mainland entity. And that is why certain businesses or certain activities must be conducted through this avenue of being set up in the mainland. Previously, for many years, it was under discussion, under implementation, where there would be a possibility of setting up a mainland company for certain activities without the requirement of having an Emirati national be associated as a shareholder in that entity. And this was very successfully implemented by the Dubai government almost a year and a half back. And they have come up with a list of positive activities. They're referred to as positive activities, wherein companies who wish to conduct those activities can now own 100% mainland entity by an expat, and there is absolutely no requirement for you to either involve an Emirati national as a 51% shareholder or have an Emirati national be involved as a local service agent. And this was a major breakthrough, like Daniel mentioned, even when it comes to foreign direct investments. This was a major breakthrough, and a lot of international clients were very excited when this resolution was successfully implemented. So this is a very brief snapshot about mainland as an avenue for setting up an entity. The second avenue in which an entity can set up business in the UAE is free zone. UAE as a jurisdiction has n number of free zones. Every emirate has their own free zone. There are specific free zones dealing with specific activities. Let's say, for example, logistics, commodities, crypto, and as Daniel mentioned, that we do have two financial centers here, the Abu Dhabi Global Market and Dubai International Financial Centers, that deal with more specific financial activities that need to be regulated given the nature of such activities. So the scope of free zones available for an investor or for a business wishing to set up in the UAE are numerous. Now, these free zones range from the type of activity to the type of office to the type of activity that you're doing. So, for example, if you are into trading and manufacturing, then you can go for a free zone such as Jebel Ali or Sharjah Airport Free Zone or Dubai Airport Free Zone that have the facility and their infrastructure to support that activity. They have specific warehousing solutions where the manufacturing can be conducted. They have effective solutions for power, for labor, manpower, and they are extremely supportive for such activities. And they also have a link to the ports, so there is an ease of importing and exporting whatever is being manufactured. Apart from this, the third avenue, which is now also becoming very well known in the UAE, which was in the past not that common and not that successful, but given that UAE has been so accommodative with the Western regulators in terms of ensuring that all the regulatory compliances are met, the offshore centers in the UAE are also becoming very well known throughout the world. There are 3 offshore centers in the UAE. There's one in Jebel Ali, which is one of the oldest offshore centers. There's one in Ajman, and the third one in Ras Al Khaimah called the RAC ICC, which is the Ras Al Khaimah International Corporate Center. These offshore centers, the beauty is that they operate in very similar nature and fashion as international offshore centers, be it in British Virgin Islands, Singapore, Hong Kong, to name a few. And the most common use of these offshore centers are threefold. First, that they are used by a lot of entities that are looking for a holding structure, a more easy, reasonably priced holding structure. And the second avenue is that this is a very, very wonderful vehicle to be used by entities that don't plan to service customers or businesses in the UAE. As the name suggests, offshore basically means off land, or it's outside of the jurisdiction. So if you have clients that are based only outside the UAE, or business is conducted only outside the UAE, then an offshore vehicle seems to be a more reasonable option. And the third possible avenue for an offshore entity is that if you wish to purchase any commercial or personal properties in the UAE, you can do so via these offshore entities. Previously, the Dubai Land Department and UAE Land Department as such was allowing entities that are foreign, so outside UAE, to own properties. However, this rule was removed, and the property could only be owned in personal name or in the name of offshore entities based in Jebel Ali and in Ras Al Khaimah. Ajman Offshore still does not have the MOU and the agreement with Dubai Land Department to be able to be allowed to hold property through their offshore entities. But RAC ICC and JAFSA both have that benefit. So this is a little bit brief about the different avenues in which you can set up your entities in the UAE. Shihan, if we could move to the next slide kindly. Right, now setting up your company in the UAE, there are three main very important aspects that every entity, every investor needs to identify and discuss, whether within your internal legal counsel, your management, or with a professional advisor if you're working with one. The first one is that what is your budget to set up the entity, which is very important because in UAE, depending on your requirement, there is a possible avenue for every entity. There is a possible avenue for startups. There's also an avenue for established multinational companies. So depending on your requirement, your budget, there is a possible solution. There's a possible free zone in which you can set up your entity. The second aspect is to consider what kind of activities you need to carry out. Depending on the activity to be carried out, a possible structure needs to be identified, whether it would be an individual owner, whether it would be a corporate owner, and lastly, to be aware whether or not you would be needing a proper physical office, or would a virtual smart desk solution be ideal for you, given that given the COVID culture, everyone is working from home. So if a possible virtual and smart desk solution works for you, then that would be needed to identify whether you need a physical office or a smart office. Depending on this, a structure can be identified, and depending on this, a free zone should be shortlisted. The requirements to set up a business in UAE are very, very simple, very straightforward. Most avenues, be it offshore, onshore, or mainland, have the scope for everything to be done on a digitized platform. Most free zones here use DocuSign for the documents to be signed off by shareholders or directors wherever they are in the world. Verification of your personal documents such as passport, etc., can be done digitally through Zoom and WebEx. So UAE has really taken on board the SMART initiative, and there is no longer a requirement as such for you to be physically present in the UAE for your company to be set up. Very basic requirements such as your personal documents, proof of your address, be it in your home country or any other country where you are residing, and information about the type of office you need, information about your resume, your CV, and certain activities will require you to provide us with certain documentary evidences that confirm that you have the capability to be involved in the activity that you are planning to carry out. For example, if you want to get a doctor's license, you would need to show them that you have the required medical degrees and you have the experience in order to be granted that activity. But that's only in the case of specific activities. For most run-of-the-mill activities, just your personal documents would be sufficient to set up the entity. Now, this takes me to the process and timeline. Most companies can be set up within a span of 10 to 25 working days, but this is highly dependent on the type of free zone that you're choosing, the type of activity that you're choosing. If it is a specialized activity, you might have to get approvals from one of the regulatory authorities, and that might add time to the process. And also the process is such that most free zones operate digitally, and there are certain forms, etc., that need to be completed, submitted to the free zone. And most free zones go through something called the CID clearance, which would be a simple immigration check on the individuals to confirm that their identity is of good conduct. And once that is done, it's pretty quick. And like I said, within 15 to 25 working days, most free zones and even mainland would be able to give you your corporate documents. Of course, there are avenues where you can get VIP services, and you can have your entity incorporated in one day if you're willing to pay that additional VIP charges. Next slide, please, Shihan. Now, once the company is set up, the next step, like Daniel mentioned, that if you are setting up an entity here, you are eligible to get an investor visa through that entity, and also employ your staff or your required colleagues through the same entity. Now, depending on the type of office space that you have availed, that would be directly proportional to the kind of visas that would be visa quota that would be allocated to your entity. So if your entity goes for a virtual office, most free zones allow your visa quota of 2, so you can recruit about 2 people through the company, and if you have a physical office, depending on the space, you could be allocated as much as 100 or 200 visas, given that the space that needs to be allocated is there. There is a space requirement of 9 square meter per employee as per guidelines, but it differs from free zone to free zone. So depending on your requirement, this can be arranged. The visa processing as such is fairly straightforward, and the UAE government is ever on the lookout to make it easier for the residents. Currently, free zone visas are valid for 3 years, and you have to ensure that every 180 days from your last exit, you visit the UAE or you enter the UAE to ensure the validity of the visa that will be issued to you. And the processing as such would be anywhere between 5 to 12 working days, depending on the time taken by the free zone to submit your application to immigration and immigration approval. There has been a major change in the process, but it has not yet been implemented. But it has been confirmed that in the near future, the immigration would be getting rid of the requirement to stamp the visas in the passport. So currently, the residence visa is physically stamped in the passport. This would be removed, and right after the visa approval, the Emirates ID, which is the national ID for every resident, that would be issued directly to you. The visa process as such is very straightforward, and there are just 3 main things that need to be processed. One is the first step is to get the entry permit issued, which is basically an e or a paper visa, which confirms that your visa has been approved. After that, you will be required to give your biometrics to the National ID Center, National ID Authority, for the purposes of issuance of your Emirates ID. And apart from that, you would need to be doing a blood test and X-ray if required to ensure that you are fit and healthy to receive this residence visa. And like I said, that it's fairly straightforward. There is a requirement from the UAE labor law that every individual, be it just an investor himself or their spouse, their maid, their colleagues, anyone who gets a visa through a company, the company is required to arrange a basic level health insurance for that individual. And this is a law that needs to be, or regulation that needs to be followed. And the stamping of the visa or the conclusion of the visa will only happen when a proof of such insurance has been provided. And needless to say, there are many options available for a good insurance, even a basic package, good insurance to be made available to people who are working and residing in the UAE. Next slide, Shihan, please. Thank you. Opening a bank account in the UAE, I think opening a bank account anywhere in the world has become such a hot topic now, given the timelines and the administrative requirements. I will not be going too much into detail because a colleague of mine, a panelist, would be speaking about this in a lot more detail after my session. But opening of a bank account in the UAE is completely possible, even though there might be some horror stories on the internet or your friends, but it is possible. Of course, there are certain guidelines, certain documentary items that you have to provide to the banks, and that is justified given that we are in an ever-changing economy and jurisdiction. So these documents are provided, and the way the bank account process is handled by yourselves, by the banker, by your professional advisors, it makes a lot of difference on how successfully and how quickly the bank account will be opened. I'll just quickly quickly let you know that there are various options, but two major options that have now come up in the UAE jurisdiction. One of them is of course commercial traditional banking, brick and mortar banks, Mashreq Bank, Emirates NBD, name it, any bank in the UAE. You can just approach them and have them open a bank account for your entity. But there are also digital solutions available through UAE IBANs being issued by regulated fintech entities, opening of offshore accounts with regulated banking providers outside the UAE. So these are two possible options that have been successfully used by companies in the UAE to open their bank account. And my colleague, like I said, will take this forward in more detail after my session. Thank you. Next slide, please, Shihan. Right. Again, this was very briefly touched upon by Daniel in terms of the other residency schemes that have been introduced in the UAE. The UAE government does pride itself and does have a lot of commendable comments to say about its expat population. So they have come up with two possible avenues where residency can be obtained by eligible individuals. There is a possibility to get a golden visa with a 5-year or a 10-year renewable agreement. And I believe that from October there will be an aspect where any golden visa holders need not enter the country in the required 180 day to ensure validity. This is still not yet been confirmed and implemented, but it is a part of the information that is released by the government. So we will just have to wait and see when it's confirmed in terms of its implementation date. The process to get a residency under the golden visa scheme would be very, very similar to getting your normal UAE residence visa through your entity as an employer or as an investor. However, there are certain eligibility criteria and support documents that will need to be provided to the immigration to get the approval for such a visa. Like Daniel mentioned, that there are 4 categories in which you can avail the golden visa. One of them is for investors. So if you are investing in a property in the UAE and the said property is not subject to a loan, it must mandatorily be handled or be held by you for at least 3 years. If you meet those criteria, then you can get an investor visa under the golden visa scheme. This is also open for entrepreneurs and also businesses that have been in the UAE for many years. They have set up entities and businesses that support the UAE jurisdiction and economy. They are also eligible to get this visa. Apart from this visa is open for special talents and researchers in various fields of science and knowledge. And of course, like Daniel mentioned, that if there are any bright students with promising scientific capabilities, where they are making their mark with sustainability, with science, and supporting the need for a better environment for our future, they would also be eligible to get this visa. Next slide, please. Right. This is again it was a very common question asked in the Q&A chat box. How much does it cost to set up a business in the UAE? Like I mentioned initially, that doing business in the UAE is for everyone. So depending on your budget, depending on your activity, depending on your criteria to have an office or not, there is a possible solution to meet your budget. Having said that, typically for a mainland entity, it can range from 25,000 to 30,000 dirhams. Now these are the max amounts. There are options available where the entity can be set up at a cost lower than what has been shared here. But like I said, that this is such a varied and vast aspect that without considering information on case-by-case basis, it will be very difficult to identify and confirm the cost for setting up the entity. For free zone setup, depending on the kind of free zone that you're going, of course, if you go for free zones based in Northern Emirates, Sharjah, Al Quwain, they're a lot more reasonable in terms of their pricing. And if you go for Dubai-based free zone, given that they are a lot more standardized, a lot more known, and the kind of solutions that they offer its members are manifold. So their pricing might relate to the benefits that you reap out of being a part of that free zone. So this is very subjected to case-by-case basis. And similarly, a professional consultant's fee would depend on the type of services that they cater to you. But most consultants come in with the knowledge and with the aim to make your life easier, to make sure that they can do everything for you, and make sure that you have a successful startup in the UAE. So I think that takes me to the last slide. I wanted to thank you all for attending today's webinar, and I hope that even though this is quite succinct and quite brief, but I hope that I was able to give you a comprehensive snapshot about doing business in the UAE. And once we finish the webinar, if you have time, happy to answer any Q&A, but my details would be on the presentation. So if you need any assistance, please do reach out to us. And thank you once again to all the honorary members of Sri Lankan Business Council. Thank you, Shehan, for moderating. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Most welcome, Akriti, and thank you very much for that very comprehensive presentation. I think it answered a lot of questions that have come on the chat, made my life easier as well. And I think it also covered all the important areas one needs to consider when looking to establish a company in Dubai or in broader terms in the UAE. So yes, I think Baker Tilly has been known to be a very reputable organization throughout the world. And if there are any such requirements, I'm sure any of our participants could reach out. And I'm sure you'll be there to answer quite a lot of questions. I see the Q&A tab with more than 80 questions at the moment. I'm not sure if we'll be able to take all of them, but at least in terms of common interest, we try to address as many questions as possible. So now that we've identified the why to establish a company in Dubai, and we've also got into the nitty-gritties of how and where to establish a company in Dubai, the costs, the procedures, the timelines, and so on. The missing element probably in this jigsaw puzzle is, once we've got all of this, how and where do we get a bank account opened? So in order to do this presentation, may I kindly call upon Mr. Ranil De Silva, and before he takes on, let me just give a quick profile of Ranil. He is currently the Director of Finance of the Sri Lankan Business Council, and in terms of his profession, he is the Group Head of Corporate Finance and Planning at the Metito Group. And Metito is a global leader and provider of choice for sustainable water management solutions. In addition, he also holds the title of Chairman and CEO of Solomons, De Silva and Murthy in Kandy, a firm of chartered accountants, tax and management consultants incorporated there. In terms of educational background, Ranil holds an MBA from the Postgraduate Institute of Management from the University of Sri Jayawardhanapura. He also possesses many certifications and awards, and he has been a member of many voluntary associations in the UAE. Frankly, if I'm to read all of them, it'll take hours. His profile is that long. He's passionate of hosting events, singing, and being a rugby referee. I honestly wonder how he manages his time with all of this. Let me kindly now invite Ranil to go ahead with the presentation on the important area of opening a bank account in the UAE. I see a lot of relevant or related questions on this area as well. So Ranil, over to you.
Thank you very much, Shehan, for the kind introduction, and glad to see Aarti and Daniel had covered most of the most important aspects of setting up a business in the UAE. Let me touch base basically on how do we get on with the bank account opening. So if I may start sharing my screen, because I guess you'll be able to see that now. So I'll be touching base on three areas, basically what to keep in mind before opening a bank account in the UAE. Some of that or most of it has been touched base. Challenges you may face while opening a bank account in the corporate world, and the documentation requirements as per corporate banking regulations for residents and non-residents. So that's the synopsis of how we are going to touch base, and I can guarantee you that I won't take more than 5 minutes of your time. So in terms of what we need to remember, as Aarti touched base very clearly, it's a mainland LLC or a branch office or a subsidiary or a free zone. You can open a bank account for any of these entities the way you want. Basically, the banking system supports to accommodate and facilitate a bank account for any of these incorporated entities. You can even do it for a startup SME, or what is essential is the documentation. The documentation involves the business activity. I've seen a few questions about the types of industries, the types of services that there is interest in bringing to UAE. So there is a list of activities being allowed to be done on mainland. There's a list of activities which are allowed to be carried out as offshore or free zone companies, and that is very clearly available. When we share the presentation, we will have certain links for those lists, which is very comprehensive and coming out of the government sources. So you will be able to look at them, and I'll be also including a couple of other web links where we will be having certain other guidelines on such activities, etc. So once you picked up your registration documentation, this is where we start. A corporate banking account can be opened with any local commercial bank. We have a list of, say, for example, more than 45 commercial banks operating in the country as onshore bankers. This includes the almost the national banks, the local banks, the regional banks, and almost every large international bank is having one way or another an office either as an onshore banking or an offshore banking platform within the UAE. So if you have your preferred bank of choice, I'm sure you will find them here as well. So in terms of the challenges on the area, the most important aspect is the tough regulatory requirements, the compliance piece of it, because UAE, if I may say, is one of the best business capitals of the world. If not, it is the business capital of the world right now, and it's ever evolving system and the technological enhancements, etc. The tough regulatory requirements and the compliance pressure will be there in order to complete your documentation. They are very particular about the commitment towards the fighting the financial crimes and the money laundering, etc. So they'll be asking a lot of questions about your sources of funds, usage of funds, etc. Providing the credibility is depending on how you want to set up yourselves. The KYC process of your personnel levels as directors, shareholders will be very important. They'll have to go through such information in a very detailed manner, and they will run through certain clearances internally with Office of Foreign Assets Control, etc. The OFAC clearances, etc. will be taken up by the bank when they process the applications for the approval process, when they process their mandate documentation. Residents and the addresses in the UAE, which Aarti explained, and then the physical office spaces for the onshore entities. We will have to have these in place, because if it is an onshore LLC, you will need all of these to be ticked off. Information about the business and the complete economic substance is another piece of information which they will be looking at. You will not be allowed to just come and say, like, hey, I want to do a business like this. I want to come, start it up here in this way, etc. And just put up a case without having some substance about the business. So you need to come up with some sort of write-ups about the technologies you will use, about the processes, the setups, if it is a manufacturing, if it is a technology, etc. You will be asked to provide some sort of a business plan, forecast, projections, and some mandatory information around what you intend to do once you open this bank account through that particular business, and it has to sync with the business activities which you have listed under your articles of association, memorandum, etc. And if you're dealing or intending to deal with high-risk areas of countries, say for example the sanctions, very conservative and very particular about that, and very compliant in that aspect as well, and it's an ever-growing aspect of all the banking networks in the world, and it's strengthening every day as we speak, so you will have to watch out for that. And if you are from a high-risk country, or if you have a partner or partnership coming through a high-risk country, again, that will have some sort of a limitation around the way you want to open the bank account. Going forward, sometimes also there will be certain minimum balance requirements. Sometimes banks ask for onshore bank accounts, especially for LLCs here locally. You'll have to have 25,000 to 50,000 dirhams depending on the bank and depending on the package they're offering. You may have to maintain certain minimum balances, etc. as well. So these are just a few points you may have to remember. In terms of the documentation, yes, you will have to get your business license, the legal documentation, your stuff which Begatili team covered, visa requirements, etc. Choosing the bank, you have a list here which you can pick and choose. So I have given the hyperlink, so you will be directed towards all the list of banks which are currently operating onshore, offshore, internationally, locally. So you will be able to find your choice of banker once the presentation comes to you. Application process will go through a proper review, and an advisor will eventually close the matters with you. So you can basically deal with the soft copies of every documentation initially. You sometimes gets directed towards a portal to upload all your information in soft form without coming here once you establish that link. And once everything is cleared, you will be asked to come over and finish off the documentation based on the fact that you sometimes have to bring original documentation, certified documentation, notarized documentation, depending on what sort of these documentation are. And the bank will have their own way of ratifying that. So in terms of documentation, the basic stuff for personal, the comprehensive KYC will be a tough ask. There will be a lot of questions on personal information, etc. If you're coming as an individual to open as a shareholder, fully fledged 100% individual to open a bank account under your business as the director or one of the directors. So there'll be quite a lot of details on FATCA forms, the foreign assets control related KYC forms, etc. Certain address proofs, utility bills are asked for, address proofs on home country here, etc. If you're coming fresh, your previous bank statements, etc. may be asked. And then, of course, your source of funds, existing contracts, if you have, depending on your business, whether you already hold any contracts or potential contracts. Of course, the constitutional documentation, and the shareholders registry, the UBO verification, which is the ultimate beneficial ownership verification, which is, say, for example, if you are setting up as a branch of a foreign entity, how the ownership of that entity works. Is it in Sri Lanka? If it is in Sri Lanka, who are the shareholders, who are the ultimate beneficial owners of this entity? And based on the percentages, each bank may go up to about 5% to detail verify that information of the ultimate beneficial ownership owners as well, in terms of ratifying the documentation on the KYC part. And that's basically majority of the documentation, and that's where you can finish off a bank account open. So the basic process is simply you go through a bank from the list. You can reach out to them directly, you can find correspondence, relationship manager. Mind you, there is a lot of bankers who are Sri Lankans who are working for almost every international local bank here in the UAE, in the corporate banking sector. So you could definitely find links to reach out to them as well, and they could be able to help you out and link you out to the relevant relationship management teams. So as I mentioned, you will be able to do it digitally, remotely, initially on the initial phase until everything gets sorted out. Once the documentation is ready, once they have reviewed it, you may have to come here, spend some time physically with them to sign off their signature cards, forms, etc., and go through certain formalities to clear off the activation of the bank account. And that's all what you need in terms of setting up a bank account. It's a very regulated place, but it's a very smooth place. You can open it in a very smooth manner. Everything is in a very formalized, organized process. And I wish you good luck for setting up your business and completing a transaction soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ranil, for that short but very comprehensive presentation as well. It included all the information required, including the bank names, the procedures, the processes, the risks involved, and so on and so forth. So thank you very much for that. The questions keep piling on. Thank you very much for posing all these questions, ladies and gentlemen. And it's now time to take up the Q&A. So just before that, if I could please share a short survey that you could all participate just on this webinar. It's more for future reference more than anything. So if you could please kindly fill this up, it will really help us going forward. And we'll move on to the Q&A now. So I've just sent that through on the chat. And starting off on the Q&A, so I'm sure all our panelists are aware and are available rather. We received some questions by email in advance, so let me take that. And I think these questions have also been repeatedly asked on the chat also. So in common interest for most, let me start off on the first question. This is a commonly asked question. Which Dubai free zone would be the most suitable to register a virtual company? And he's also mentioned about a particular activity of quantity surveying, but I'd rather first have the first part of that question answered. Probably I'll put this on to Akriti.
Hi, thank you. So in terms of our experience as advisors, I would say that there are two free zones currently who've completely digitized their process, and they have been champions in the ease of virtually setting up the business from outside the UAE. One of them is International Free Zone Authority, IFZA, which are now operating with Dubai Silicon Oasis, and the other one is DMCC, Dubai Multi Commodity Center. They both work beautifully for clients looking for a virtual solution to set up the entity. However, having said that, like Ranil mentioned, that for bank account opening, a physical presence is a must. So even if the entity is set up, in order to go to the next steps, your visa processing, bank account opening, you would need to be here. I hope this answered the. But again, this is as per our experience, our knowledge, and the feedback we've received from our customers, from our dealings. These two are the most appropriate options for virtual setups.
Thank you very much. I think that answers the question. Moving on to Daniel, there's a question about this 100% ownership versus sponsorship requirements. With the recent change in laws, how does this affect a new business investor in terms of deciding on which option to go with? So is it mandated that certain activities have to be need to have a sponsor, or can they go as a 100% owned business?
Yeah, it's a good question. The first question is to decide whether you are more suitable to a offshore company, a free zone company, or a mainland company. So that question will be based on the nature of your business and the end customer, where your end customer is located. And then once you make that decision, you can decide whether you go mainland, free zone, or offshore, as I said. So in the free zone, there are over 30 free zones in Dubai, and different free zones have different scopes of services and added value offerings they can give, but they're also separated by industries. So some free zones can provide certain business activities which other free zones cannot. So for example, if you want to do manufacturing or industrial activities, you might go to an industrial focused free zone, while if you're more technology focused, you might go to Dubai Internet City or DMCC and so on. And then if you were going to focus on local customers within the UAE and you want to do your dealings directly with them, not through any third party, and you want to set up on the mainland, then you can do that, and you'll have to just see, based on the activity that you do and the business that you're trying to conduct there, whether that activity is on the list that allows 100% foreign ownership. So that can be quickly checked through the Dubai Department of Economic Development or through whatever service provider you're using. So in essence, it just gives you more choice. If you're already here in Dubai operating in a free zone, you can now look at the mainland if you want to move over, or if you haven't invested yet, it just gives you more choice and more flexibility. So in general, the Dubai government initiated this move to make the business environment more hospitable, more open, and more easily accessible.
Thank you very much. Next question is to Ranil, and I'll combine two questions into one here. The first part of it is, what advice can you give to help a newly registered virtual company open a bank account in Dubai? And also, can a bank account be operated 100% remotely, that is online?
I think the answer for the second question is yes, but you still have to complete the first phase, as Kriti mentioned. To start it up, yes, you need to be here at least for one day. I mean, we've seen a lot of colleagues of us throughout the history in the recent past coming up and setting up the accounts and gone back, and they've operated digitally online, because online platforms are readily available with almost every UAE-based bank right now. So advice is basically, it depends, right? So it depends on the size of your organization, what sort of activities you intend to do. If you are going to be doing international trade completely, like dealing with Swift messages, telegraphic transfers, inward, outward, remotely, yes, you just need an online platform and you can deal with it. So you open LCs, you pay trade transactions and then negotiate it and all that. You can do digital completely. You can apply LCs, you can issue guarantees whatsoever. But if you're intending to do local trade, say for example, within the UAE, and then you have suppliers depositing checks in your bank account and you got to pay so local suppliers through check payments, etc., then you need to have a signatory locally here. But for that, yes, the digital solutions again are available. Like people have COS, check outsourcing system, where you can print the check and send it on courier to the beneficiary. So the technology is already there in a very high scale. The fintech solutions have come through in a very advanced phase right now. So it depends on what you want to do, and I'm sure the banks, you have a fleet of banks. You have the local banks, which are somewhat traditionally conventional, to all the way to the global banks, the global international banks of the world, the Stanseas, the HSBCs, the cities of the world. So you have a full spectrum of banks available, ready to be used. So it depends on what your requirement is, and then you can position yourself to go with the local small bank. Still, they will be very highly advanced in terms of technology and the setup. Or you can go to a regional bank, which is in the middle, who are large, solid setups. Or you can go with an international bank, which will have the global reach in elsewhere. But when I say local banks, even the local banks have FI lines, if you know what I mean, the direct international transaction trading lines with almost everywhere in the world. So we know the global reach is there from Dubai for anywhere in the world effectively in that sense. So you can start with a smaller bank and go on expanding if you want to. I hope I answered it.
Yes, indeed, that answers the question very comprehensively. Moving on to a question which is interesting. So there's a question here on the chat which asks, as a digital marketing startup, what would be the best place to start up the business? Is it mainland or free zone? If it's a free zone, which one? I know it depends on a lot of factors, but Akriti, how could we address this? Because there are similar type of questions throughout.
Yeah, I went through the chat box, and I think one of the main questions is mainland or free zone. Technically speaking, and I cannot like my colleague said, I cannot give you any advice right now because it's all case to case. But technically speaking, for any sort of service tax activities, they can be conducted through a free zone entity. And the benefit of free zone is that, like Daniel mentioned, given corporate tax coming in, any free zones that are doing business which will be eligible to be exempt from corporate tax, it would be ideal to have a free zone set up. But apart from that, I can't say much right now because it really is dependent. And in terms of which free zone is best for certain activities, now even if these certain free zones, like for example, DMCC was set up initially for commodity trading, so any businesses that would be trading in commodities, coffee, gold, etc., that was the main avenue for DMCC. However, over the years, DMCC now set up pretty much every entity, every activity possible, be it oil and gas, shipping, etc. So the kind of activity that you wish to do will be available in pretty much every free zone, but your budget, your requirement, be it because for example, you require a physical office for a free zone such as IFZA, which has a lot more reasonable physical office solutions as compared to DMCC, where the real estate or the physical office options are a little bit priced a little bit higher. So depending on your budget, your requirement, your future strategy for the business, you can then select the free zone that you wish to go for.
Thank you very much. Daniel, this question is to you, and it's again in two parts. The first part is, what support does the Dubai Chamber of Commerce offer to investors? That's one, aside from establishing the company, of course. And the second part is, in the case of commercial disputes, does the Dubai Chamber of Commerce offer any services, and how does it work?
Okay, in terms of the services we offer, It depends whether you're our member company or not. In order to be our member company, you need to have registered an entity in Dubai already. So that's one of the 3 types of entities we discussed today. If you're not a member, though, we still like to support you and help you on your investor journey here to Dubai. So the first thing we can do is we can provide market information on the different sector reports, different documents related to the economy, or on procedures for setting up or applying for certain documentation and filing here in Dubai. We have an economic research department which publish all of these. They're all on our website, and we can share them as well. And also, in order to attract more companies and HNIs, high net worth individuals into Dubai, we're working closely with the rest of the Dubai government, including Dubai Economy and Tourism, to provide support to incoming investors in terms of introducing you to the relevant government departments. If, for example, you want to apply for a golden visa, we can help you introduce to the relevant government department there. If you are doing some kind of investment and there's a particular partner or end clients that you're looking at talking to, we can check if it's a member of our database, of our 300,000 database, and then we can give you a virtual introduction and allow you to have a virtual or offline meeting. So at the moment, we have 12 international offices. They're all conducting their services in market. They're looking for companies who want to invest or trade with Dubai. And we're basically providing them data on the market, connecting them with government stakeholders as necessary, and connecting them with business stakeholders as necessary. And in terms of mediation, arbitration, the Dubai International Arbitration Center used to be under the umbrella of Dubai Chamber. It's now leaving the Dubai Chamber umbrella as we are going through a restructuring and entering the next phase of our journey. So DAC will be an independent arbitration and mediation service center, and it will be the main one here in Dubai. So if you need any connections to DAC, I can connect you by email. Just contact my email I left in the presentation.
Thank you very much, Daniel. There are so many who are asking if we will be sharing the recording of this session along with the presentations, and yes, we will be doing that, which will also include the contact details of each of the presenters. Next is a question to you, Afrika. So it's again another common question. It's on, sorry, just lost that. Yeah. Before that, let me just ask Daniel one more question. So does the Dubai Chamber of Digital Economy include cryptocurrency? And let me come to Akriti on a related question soon after.
Does it cover cryptocurrency?
Yes.
Yes, cryptocurrency will be covered by the Digital Chamber. I also saw another question asking about if any free zones are supporting of cryptocurrencies and NFTs. I would say on that one, the DMCC is very good and very strong in that department. They have the Dubai DMCC Crypto Center there, and I know of plenty of crypto companies that have established there as well. And the government in Dubai at an emirate level and at a federal level have been doing a lot to introduce legislation around crypto and blockchain technology here. So those companies are very welcome in Dubai. As a digital chamber or any kind of chamber, we're more providing a platform to support the growth of the ecosystem. So we're providing events, economic research, partner introductions, these kind of services. So the digital chamber will be doing that also. Okay.
After there's a related question on whether the crypto related activity could be conducted under free zone license. How would you answer this?
Right. So like Daniel said, that currently the only free zone that is supporting and issuing licenses for crypto business is DMCC, and apart from that, ADGM also have a regulatory section or department that issues crypto related activities. But I just want to clarify that the only activities currently authorized in the UAE under crypto relate to custodian services and proprietary trading. If you wish to set up an exchange, etc., there is a possibility to do so within ADGM, but it is severely regulated, where the opening can take up to 6 to 8 months. Of course, DIFC is also coming up with their own regulation, and towards the end of this year, once they get the approval from SEA and other regulators, they would also be entering the crypto avenue. So currently, depending on if this type of activity fits into what you wish to do, then yes, DMCC is an ideal avenue to set up. They do have like Daniel said, they have a crypto hub and CV Labs, and through that they do support crypto businesses, be it from setting up office space and even bank account opening.
Thank you, Akriti. There's another question for you, Akriti. Can Sri Lankan technology-based startups still without traction can apply for this opportunity? I think that's about the startup license that you mentioned.
Sorry, could you repeat that again? So Sri Lankan technology-based
startups.
Okay.
Could they avail the opportunity of that startup related license which you mentioned during the presentation?
Yes, absolutely. There are both Dubai and UAE have specific avenues. So within Abu Dhabi, there's something called Hub 71, and you can go up and check on this. And in Dubai, there's something called Astro Labs within DMCC. These are both specifically so for tech startups. They're sort of like incubators. So for the first year, they will provide you with the specific physical office, support you in terms of networking, in terms of getting to know the market. So there is definitely a possibility for you to get into the startup avenue and get a startup license. So you can look up at these two possible incubators that support tech startups.
Thank you very much. Ranil, there's a question, and I'm combining a few questions together here in terms of the taxes in the UAE. So that will include obviously VAT, corporate tax, and how do you see this progressing? Would it progress to income tax?
Yeah, I think see what we've seen. I've been in the region for 15 years, and there are some of the board members who have seen for 40 plus years in the UAE. The tax culture and the setup has been maturing and streamlining and establishing itself for the last sort of 6-7 years. We have seen an evolvement on the tax culture in the UAE with the introduction of the VAT a couple of years ago, and in the introduction of the corporate tax for local entities, the LLCs, etc., coming up in the coming years. So what we believe is that UAE now is getting its alignment with the rest of the world in terms of economic alignment, in terms of trading alignment, by shifting the weekend to the same international weekend, etc. So we are not feeling any difference in that sense. So we will most likely end up having some sort of personal taxes, but personal taxes for me personally, if I want to look at it, should be attached with the permanent residency. Permanent residency is not yet offered by anybody in the UAE for anybody. So in other parts of Europe or the Australias or the Canadas, USs, yes, that is there, and that is why you get a personal tax associated with it. So I don't think we will get into that level anytime soon. But the chances are, once the maturity on the tax culture is established in terms of streamlining and aligning with the rest of the world, eventually it might come as a eventuality in the future, but not immediately. I would say it's a personal opinion for me. I'm not representing the government or anything that I want to ensure that this is a qualified view, but it is something which people can expect in the coming years, but not very immediately.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think that answers that question in general. Let's take one final question and then close off. I know there are so many unanswered questions, but we'll do best to get back to each of you. And if not, the contact details of each of these presenters will be included, so you'll be able to get in touch and proceed. But yeah, let's take one final question. So there's a person who has recently established a business here in the UAE, and he says during the process, he's been trying to open a bank account with many of the leading banks, and he's given a few names. I'll not read them out. However, they've declined it outright. So, I mean, this seems to be like a challenge, particularly for the wholesalers or general trading trading activity per se. How could they go about opening a bank account, and what kind of, I think Ranil could answer that, and probably the other two panelists also could join in.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think I would also like to. I think one Ranil answers. There's a lot of people have this question on the chat box. Sorry, Ranil, to steal your spotlight. I'll just take a minute, and then you can build up on this. Why is it easier for a mainland entity to open a bank account and not a free zone entity? The reason for this is, and this is a misconception in today's time. Previously, for all mainland entities, they would require a physical office to be attached to that entity. And that is why it was easier to define substance of that entity. The bankers could actually go and see that there's a physical office, that there are employees working, and that the entity is actually conducting operational business. And that's why it was easier to get compliance approval. Whereas for free zone, the whole model for free zone setup was based on a virtual office or a smart office solution. And that's why there was that gap or that issue. However, for mainland as well, nowadays there are options for certain activities where you can get a desk in a business center, and they've made it a lot more easier. So at this stage in time, it's not that parity does not exist between free zone and mainland. And like Ranil, and he will explain this after my comment, that is very important to establish substance or to understand that why the bankers keep asking for a physical office or a physical presence. And that's basically the distinction and the reason for disparity between free zone and mainland. Sorry, Ranil, I'll now let you take the question from Shihan. Sorry about that.
No worries. Thanks. I think that's basically the initial part of the answer. And to add on to it, I think the important piece from a banker's point of view is it's not only the opening of the bank account. You can open the bank account, but if you are unable to maintain that bank account through annual reviews and continuous business relationship, that is where the bankers are going to struggle. So the bankers have regulation in terms of Central Bank of UAE, etc., to ensure that they have to close off non-performing bank accounts and also non-compliant bank accounts. So they go through a KYC annual review process where they will have to ensure the substance piece, as Arti mentioned, that it is actually related to a business which is existing, which is performing a real life actual business in some form of one way or another. So if it is a mainland business, they could visit, they do annual visits, factory visits, see the place around and all that. It's much easier in that way. So some of the banks actually do not necessarily also promote the offshore or free zone accounts in that way. So if you look at the total fleet of banks we have, if you ask every bank whether you'll be able to open an account for any type of organization within the UAE which is legally available, they may say, no, we don't want to deal with this sector. We don't want to open it in this whatever. So there is restrictions and limitations around the bank's ability, and it's depending on the bank's appetite, basically, on where they want to be exposed and how they are structured in terms of the regional presence, local presence, etc. So that's another piece where you may have to go in. So you have to pick the right bank for your right business. So your type of business, and then based on that, out of the 45, 50 banks, maybe we can shortlist 5, 7, and then go through that and then shortlist the best candidate for you. So for those sort of works, yes, as I mentioned, especially for the Sri Lankan audience who is here, you can reach out to us and maybe we can give us some guidance and certain view about it, and then you could directly deal with it, and we could introduce the banking colleagues. Actually, there is a Sri Lanka Professional Bankers Association being incorporated in terms of a legal association, because they are operating currently under various smaller groups. We are trying to bring it under the umbrella of Sri Lanka Professional Association, which is a legally incorporated body under the UAE authorities here. And once that comes in, you will have a recognition of the bankers, of the Sri Lankan bankers, for you to access as a starting access point, so that you could be guided within the Sri Lankan relationship teams itself, which could be a more comfortable situation, obviously, for you coming from Sri Lankan background to start dealing with an understanding in that sense. So this is why it is currently.
Thank you, Ranil. One final question that is coming, which I need to take up, and let's close it up with this, is that what advice can you give for a startup who plans to introduce a unique preschool or Montessori and daycare model. How can we find info on the legal aspect and industry requirements or prerequisites? Daniel?
I think it's Akriti's
Yeah,
question, but it's
I'll
the
take this up.
KHDA, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So, Shihan, because this is in the avenue of education and knowledge. Before they set up, they will need to approach KHDA, which is Knowledge and Human Resource Development Authority, and they are the right ones who would guide them in terms of what kind of activities they can get, what kind of eligibility criteria they will have to meet in terms of space requirements, health and safety, environmental aspects, fire hazard, etc. So there will be quite a massive and tedious list to follow through. One of the successful things that our clients have done in the past is where the model works is that you could possibly approach a smaller Montessori setup already working in the UAE, and that is up for sale, and you can use their current approvals in place and then add on any specific activities or courses that you wish to operate through that avenue. But that would be an easier option to approach this, given that you can work with someone who already has the knowledge. But otherwise, the right portal would be to first approach KHDA, get their understanding in terms of what documentary information they need to take your request to the committee to get approval, and then that would follow through with the setup of the entity in mainland. And I believe this activity would be required to be conducted in mainland itself. And if they wish to open a branch of this Montessori in a free zone, a zone designated as free zone, they can set up a branch of the mainland. One of those aspects can be looked at.
Thank you very much, Akriti. And that brings us to the conclusion of this webinar. And let me just formally thank a few people here and organizations. Starting off with the Dubai Chamber of Commerce, Daniel, thank you very much for joining this session. I think it was a very useful session for all our members and the participants. A very big thank you also to Akriti on behalf of Baker Tilly. I think that was a very insightful presentation, and I think you answered a lot of questions. I know it's created a lot of questions, further few more questions, but I'm sure that the answers that you gave.
Thank you very much.
Thank you also to Ranil, as the Finance Director of the Sri Lankan Business Council, for that very insightful presentation on the account opening. And I would also like to thank His Excellency, the Ambassador Malraj De Silva, the Ambassador of Sri Lanka to the UAE, and also Honorable Nalinda Vijayaratna, the Consul General of Sri Lanka to Dubai and Northern Emirates, for joining this session. Aside, thank you also to the National Chamber of Exporters and all members from it who've joined us today. And I cannot leave out Women in Management. They had a wonderful conference and an award ceremony recently in Dubai. It was a mega event, and they've also joined hands with us recently and also on this webinar. Thank you very much, Dr. Sulochana Sigara, who's the founder, and also to all your members. A very big thank you to the chairman and the board of directors of the Sri Lankan Business Council for putting up this wonderful webinar. I know it was a lot of work and a lot of effort, but I think it finally paid off. We had more than 600 members put together across the multiple channels that we've been streaming this on, including Zoom and YouTube. And it's been a great number of participants that we've had. Thank you also to the past chairman of the SLBC, Mr. Suren Swaminathan. I know you've also been part of this since day one on this webinar. And a very big thank you also to all the SLBC members and all the participants. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this session. I hope it was useful. And we'll be sharing the recording of this session along with the presentations shortly. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, Shihan, for being such a great moderator. We must thank you as well. Thank you so much.
No problem. Most welcome.
Thank you, Shihan. Thank you, everyone.